Imagine stepping into a time machine, not to see grand battles or political upheavals, but to wander through American kitchens, dining rooms, and soda fountains of the past. Places where the smells of sizzling lard, the rich aroma of turtle soup, or the faint glow of a bread loaf could tell you more about a moment in history than any textbook ever could. America's culinary story is filled with curiosity, invention, and even danger. Foods and drinks that were once celebrated, savored, and trusted, but which today would be unthinkable to eat. Some of these foods promised health and vitality. Radium bread, glowing with radioactive miracles, was once advertised as a way to strengthen the body and invigorate the soul. Families paid extra for a slice, believing in the healing powers of science itself, never imagining the hidden dangers inside. Others carried allure and sophistication, like absinthe, the infamous green fairy, said to spark creativity among poets and painters, only to be banned amid fears of madness. Even something as simple as milk, once delivered fresh from the farm in creamy raw form, became a regulated commodity because of concerns for safety and disease. Many vanished for reasons less obvious than danger. Cultural norms and ethics shaped what was acceptable at the table. Horse meat, once a practical protein after the hardships of war, was abandoned not because it was unsafe, but because Americans came to view the horse as a companion rather than a dinner plate. Turtle soup, a dish that once graced presidential tables and high society banquets, disappeared as the availability of its main ingredient dwindled and urban tastes shifted. Exotic delights, too, became forbidden. Pufferfish, Kinder Surprise eggs, and shark fin soup all sparked curiosity and delight, only to vanish under the weight of regulation, safety concerns, or conservation efforts. Even beloved beverages were not immune. Coca-Cola, with its secret cocaine-laced beginnings, transformed into a safer, more palatable version, while sassafras root beer lost its signature flavor when the FDA outlawed its key ingredient. Every vanished dish or drink carries a story, a lesson in the collision between nostalgia, science, and society. These foods are more than curiosities. They are cultural touchstones, markers of a time when Americans experimented boldly, sometimes foolishly, with what they put in their bodies. This is a journey through that hidden history. Each item on this list is a glimpse into the past, a story of innovation, indulgence, danger, and ultimately disappearance. These banned American foods are echoes of flavors, smells, and experiences that once defined ordinary life, a taste of a world that can never return. As we explore each of them, we'll discover not just why they were beloved, but why they were lost, and perhaps why we still remember them today with a mix of nostalgia, wonder, and disbelief. Number 1. The glow of radium bread. There was a time when Americans actually ate glowing bread, believing it could make them stronger, younger, and more alive. In the 1920s, a bakery in St. Louis proudly sold something called radium bread. It was made with radium water, a liquid laced with tiny amounts of radioactive material. Back then, radium was the marvel of modern science, glowing faintly in the dark and promising to heal everything from fatigue to aging. People were fascinated by it. Science was new, exciting, and full of mystery. If it glowed, it had to be good for you. By day, the bread looked ordinary, but under darkness, it shimmered with a faint greenish light. Newspapers called it the bread of vitality, and doctors endorsed it as a cure for weakness. Magazines ran ads showing smiling families eating it at breakfast, believing each slice brought renewed health. In a world that was still recovering from World War I and the 1918 flu pandemic, hope was easy to sell, and radium seemed like bottled hope. For a short time, radium bread became a symbol of progress. It fit perfectly into the 1920s dream of modern living: cars, electricity, motion pictures, and science in your kitchen. It represented trust in discovery, faith in the future, and the belief that technology could only ever make life better. Then the dream began to rot from within. Factory workers who painted glow-in-the-dark watch dials with radium started to fall sick. Their teeth loosened, their bones ached. Some even developed a strange, deadly glow of their own. The newspapers that once praised radium now told the story of the radium girls, women whose lives were destroyed by the same substance thought to bring vitality. When people realized that the miracle mineral inside their watches and beauty creams was also inside their food, the fascination turned to fear. Sales vanished almost overnight. The bakery that made radium bread closed quietly, and regulators began cracking down on radium-based products. By the 1930s, it was no longer seen as a symbol of health, but a haunting lesson in misplaced faith. The story of radium bread is more than a strange footnote in history. It's a reminder of how easily progress can blind us, and how trust in science without understanding can turn wonder into tragedy. And as America turned away from its glowing loaves, another kind of forbidden indulgence was about to face its own reckoning. A drink so powerful, so misunderstood that it would be banned for nearly a century. 2. The tragedy of absinthe. It was called the Green Fairy, a drink that shimmered like bottled magic. For decades, absinthe captured the imagination of artists, writers, and dreamers who believed it could unlock creativity itself. But behind its emerald glow, America saw something dangerous, something worth banning. Absinthe first arrived in the United States during the mid-1800s, imported from France and Switzerland. It wasn't just another spirit, it was a ritual. Drinkers poured a measure of the green liquor into a glass, balanced a sugar cube on a silver spoon, and slowly dripped cold water over it. The liquid turned cloudy and milky, releasing the scent of anise and wormwood. It was mysterious, poetic, and, at the time, utterly fashionable. In the bohemian circles of Paris, absinthe was celebrated by names like Van Gogh, Hemingway, and Oscar Wilde. American artists and intellectuals followed suit, believing the drink freed the mind. To them, it wasn't just alcohol, it was inspiration in a glass. When it reached American bars in New Orleans and New York, absinthe became a symbol of sophistication, rebellion, and art itself. But as its popularity grew, so did fear. Temperance activists and early moral reformers claimed absinthe drove people insane. They said it caused hallucinations, madness, even murder. The key ingredient, wormwood, contained a compound called thujone, believed to cause brain damage and violent behavior. Sensational news stories spread across Europe and America, describing absinthe murders, where drinkers supposedly went mad. Whether the science was real or not didn't matter. The legend stuck. In 1912, the United States banned absinthe outright. It was grouped with narcotics and poisons, a victim of both misunderstanding and the rising wave of prohibition sentiment. Bottles were seized, bars went dry, and America's brief flirtation with the Green Fairy was over. For decades, absinthe became a ghost, spoken of in whispers, romanticized in novels, but impossible to legally taste. The ban wasn't lifted until the early 2000s, when modern testing proved that real absinthe was no more dangerous than other liquors. By then, nearly a century of mystery had given it an almost mythical status. Absinthe's story is a reminder of how fear and misunderstanding can erase entire pieces of culture. A drink that once inspired art and conversation became a cautionary tale about panic and perception. And while America was banning green spirits, another delicacy from across the ocean would tempt thrill seekers with something even riskier, not for what it did to the mind, but what it could do to the body. 3. Pufferfish on American plates. It's one of the most dangerous foods in the world, so deadly that a single bite prepared the wrong way can stop a human heart in minutes. Yet for a brief, daring moment in American history, pufferfish, or fugu, was actually served on American tables. In the years after World War II, Japan's influence began weaving into American culture. Soldiers returning home from the Pacific brought stories of exotic foods, customs, and flavors they'd never encountered before. Among them was fugu, a Japanese delicacy known for its high stakes preparation. When sliced by a trained chef, it was considered one of the purest, most refined tastes on earth. But if even the tiniest amount of its natural toxin, tetrodotoxin, remained, it could be instantly fatal. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, a handful of Japanese restaurants in California and Hawaii began offering fugu to curious American diners. They advertised it as a culinary thrill, a chance to experience something forbidden and prestigious. Wealthy businessmen, soldiers, and adventurous eaters lined up to try it, often more for the danger than the flavor. But it didn't take long for things to go wrong. A few cases of poisoning surfaced, some ending in tragedy. Headlines described victims who had collapsed within minutes of eating, paralyzed but fully conscious, unable to breathe. The stories shocked the public. What had seemed like a refined cultural experience suddenly looked like Russian roulette with chopsticks. By the mid 1950s, the US government stepped in. Strict bans were placed on the import and sale of pufferfish meat. Only licensed laboratories could handle it, and restaurants were forbidden from serving it without government approval, a permission that almost no one could get. Overnight, fugu vanished from menus, slipping back into legend. For decades, Americans could only read about it in magazines or see it in travel documentaries. The idea of eating something that might kill you became both horrifying and strangely romantic. Some called it the meal that defines mortality. Others said it symbolized the post-war American fascination with danger, the same era that gave us atomic diners and thrill rides. Today, a few highly regulated restaurants in New York and California can legally serve imported, pre-cleared fugu. But the spirit of those early dinners, the whispered tension, the quiet bravery of the first bites, is long gone. What remains is a strange piece of culinary history, when Americans flirted with death in the name of curiosity. And as the country moved on from poisons and glowing foods, another everyday indulgence would face its own reckoning, not because it was deadly, but because science revealed a darker truth hiding in its roots. Number 4. The era of sassafras root beer. Before Coca-Cola, before Pepsi, before the neon drinks of the modern age, there was root beer, America's first sweet fizz. But what gave it that earthy, comforting flavor was something most of us will never taste again: real sassafras root. For generations, sassafras was part of American life. Native American tribes brewed its roots into medicinal teas. Early settlers used it as a cure-all, good for colds, digestion, even cleansing the blood. By the late 1800s, it became the heart of homemade root beer. Families would boil sassafras bark with molasses, wintergreen, and sugar, creating a rich, spicy drink that smelled like the woods after rain. It wasn't just a beverage, it was a piece of the frontier, bottled and bubbling. When commercial root beer hit the market in the early 1900s, sassafras was the main flavor. It was wholesome, nostalgic, and uniquely American. Companies like Hires built empires on it, promoting root beer as a health tonic and a pure family drink. It reminded people of small town life, of porch swings and summer fairs. Every sip tasted like simpler times. Then came 1960. Scientists at the FDA made a discovery that changed everything. Sassafras contains safrole, a natural compound that, when tested on lab animals, was found to cause liver cancer. Overnight, what had been a symbol of innocence became a public health concern. The FDA banned sassafras and safrole from use in all commercial foods and drinks. Root beer makers scrambled to adapt. Artificial sassafras flavor was developed, mimicking the taste without the chemical risk. Most people never noticed the change, but something deeper was lost: the connection to the real, living root that once defined the drink. Homesteaders and hobbyists still brewed their own sassafras tea for a while, believing the ban was overblown, but even that faded as the plant's reputation declined. The modern versions we drink today may carry the name root beer, but they've long since lost the root. It's strange to think that the original American soda, the flavor of the pioneer era, is now a forbidden relic. Sassafras once represented healing, nature, and home. Now it's a quiet reminder of how science reshapes tradition and how even comfort can come under regulation's eye. And while one flavor vanished for being too natural, another kind of meat disappeared for being too emotional. An American protein that fed families, fueled controversy, and broke hearts all at once. Number 5. The short life of horse meat steaks. There was a time when Americans didn't flinch at the idea of horse meat on their plates. In the post World War II era, it was considered a practical, even nutritious alternative to beef. Yet emotion and ethics would soon push it off menus forever. During the war years, food rationing made beef and pork scarce and expensive. Horse meat, lean and rich in protein, seemed like a logical solution. But it wasn't just about survival. Some American butchers and restaurants began marketing it as a delicacy, tender, flavorful, and surprisingly palatable. In certain regions, horse steaks appeared in diners, cafes, and even hotel menus. Horse meat carried a sense of practicality. Many families grew up knowing animals as work partners on farms, using every part of the animal was seen as responsible. Nutritionally, it was excellent, lower in fat than beef and rich in iron. The meals were simple: a pan seared horse steak, perhaps smothered in onions, served with potatoes or greens. Yet, for all its practicality, the public reaction was emotional. Horses weren't just animals, they were companions, symbols of freedom, labor, and loyalty. The idea of eating one sparked discomfort, moral outrage, and even ridicule. Satirical cartoons appeared in newspapers, mocking those who dared to order cow's cousin for dinner. Families debated the ethics at home, and letters poured into local newspapers, insisting this was not food, but betrayal. By the late 1940s, mounting public pressure and cultural discomfort led to the decline of horse meat in America. The few restaurants still serving it quietly removed it from menus. Farmers and butchers shifted focus back to cattle, pork, and poultry. What was once a practical solution became a forbidden indulgence almost overnight. Horse meat today is virtually absent from American cuisine, though it remains common in some European and Asian cultures. For Americans, it has become a historical curiosity, a glimpse into a time when necessity, taste, and morality collided at the dinner table. The story of horse steaks is a reminder that food is not only about sustenance, it's about identity, culture, and emotion. Sometimes what we eat is as much about what we love as what we need. And while one form of meat vanished for emotional reasons, another everyday ingredient would soon face scrutiny, not because it was forbidden, but because science revealed its hidden dangers. Har 6. Lard fried everything. For decades, American kitchens smelled of sizzling fat, a comforting aroma that promised warmth, flavor, and home-cooked goodness. Lard was the secret behind countless dishes: biscuits, fried chicken, pie crusts, and vegetables, making meals rich, golden, and unforgettable. Lard was more than just cooking fat. It was a cornerstone of American culinary tradition. In farmhouses and city kitchens alike, it was inexpensive, versatile, and available year-round. Generations grew up eating meals fried in lard, savoring the crispy edges, the flaky crusts, and the depth of flavor it imparted. It wasn't just food, it was memory, culture, and comfort all in one. Before the rise of vegetable oils and margarine, lard was considered a wholesome staple. Doctors even praised it for its energy content, particularly for laborers and children. Sunday dinners often featured golden fried chicken or pan-browned potatoes glistening with lard. Family recipes passed from mother to daughter often depended on it to deliver that perfect texture and taste. But by the mid-20th century, medical research began warning about the dangers of saturated fats. Lard, rich in cholesterol, was suddenly labeled a threat to heart health. Public perception shifted. Where once lard symbolized indulgence and warmth, it now became synonymous with disease and excess. Home cooks reluctantly replaced it with vegetable shortening, margarine, or oil, ingredients lighter on the heart but heavier on nostalgia. Lard didn't disappear overnight, but its golden age ended quietly. Recipes adapted, textures changed, and that unmistakable flavor faded from everyday meals. Today, only a handful of purists and traditional bakers still use it, preserving the taste of America's past in pie crusts and biscuits. The story of lard is more than a culinary change. It's a reflection of how health, science, and culture reshape the foods we take for granted. What was once essential to the American table became forbidden in polite, health conscious society. And as lard faded from kitchens, another simple but controversial ingredient would face its own battle with regulation. Not a fat this time, but milk in its purest, but most nostalgic form. The seven, the scandal of raw milk. Once, milk wasn't just a drink, it was a daily ritual, a symbol of freshness and family care. Straight from the farm, creamy, rich, and unpasteurized, raw milk flowed into American homes for generations. Families trusted their local dairies, believing the milk they drank carried the health and vitality of the farm itself. In the early 20th century, raw milk was everywhere. Milkmen delivered it door to door, farmers sold it directly from their barns, and recipes relied on its natural richness. It wasn't only consumed fresh, it was the foundation for butter, cheese, and ice cream. Children drank it warm, sometimes straight from the cow, and generations swore it was superior to anything processed. But raw milk carried risks that weren't immediately obvious. Without pasteurization, it could harbor dangerous bacteria like Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli. As urban populations grew and dairy distribution expanded, outbreaks of illness became more frequent and more publicized. What was once considered wholesome and safe began to be seen as hazardous. By the 1920s and 1930s, public health campaigns and government regulations started pushing pasteurized milk as the standard. Pasteurization, heating milk to kill bacteria, became mandatory in many states. Families who had grown up with raw milk resisted at first, lamenting the loss of flavor, texture, and that creamy mouthfeel that only farm fresh milk could provide. Slowly, though, convenience, safety, and regulation prevailed. Raw milk became nostalgic, almost mythical, a taste of the past that could only be found on small farms or through illegal means. Advocates still argue for its health benefits today, claiming it preserves enzymes and probiotics lost in pasteurization. But for the majority of Americans, raw milk is no longer a daily staple. It's a whispered memory of simpler times. The story of raw milk is about trust, tradition, and the tension between safety and nostalgia. A beverage once central to family life became restricted, not because it wasn't cherished, but because knowledge and caution forced a change. As milk was tamed and regulated, another delicacy would vanish from tables, not for safety, but simply because its main ingredient disappeared, an indulgence once served in presidential mansions and pioneer kitchens alike. Now for 8, the lost world of turtle soup. Turtle soup was once a mark of refinement in American cuisine, a dish that graced the tables of presidents, pioneers, and the wealthiest families alike. Rich, flavorful, and painstakingly prepared, it symbolized elegance, patience, and a connection to both land and water. In the 18th and 19th centuries, snapping turtles were harvested from rivers and ponds across the country. Their meat was tender and slightly gamey, like perfect for slow simmering in a broth of herbs, wine, and vegetables. Turtle soup became a signature dish at banquets, often served with a drizzle of sherry and a sprinkling of nutmeg. Cities like New York and Philadelphia even had specialty turtle houses, restaurants dedicated solely to this delicacy. The soup mattered not just for taste, but for status. Serving turtle soup demonstrated wealth, sophistication, and a knowledge of culinary tradition. Families prided themselves on the recipe passed down through generations, often guarded as closely as gold. To eat it was to partake in a ritual that connected America's frontier past to its growing cosmopolitan present. Yet, the dish's popularity was tied directly to the availability of turtles. As urbanization, hunting, and habitat loss increased, the snapping turtle population dwindled. By the early 20th century, wild turtles became harder to find, more expensive, and increasingly regulated. What was once commonplace became a rare treat, reserved for special occasions or the very wealthy. Today, turtle soup is mostly absent from American menus, remembered only in old cookbooks, historical accounts, and the occasional nostalgic revival. Its disappearance is not due to danger or scandal, but scarcity, a reminder of how tastes, resources, and ecosystems are intertwined. The soup that once warmed the tables of presidents and pioneers alike has quietly slipped into memory. Turtle soup tells us something broader about food. Its significance is often as much about culture and access as it is about flavor. When the main ingredient vanishes, the dish becomes history, a story preserved in writing and memory rather than on the plate. And as turtle soup disappeared from American kitchens, a seemingly innocent treat from across the ocean would face its own ban, not because it was rare, but because it contained a hidden danger. However, 9. The ban on Kinder Surprise eggs. Few treats captured the imagination of children quite like the Kinder Surprise egg. A chocolate shell concealing a tiny toy inside, it promised delight, mystery, and the thrill of discovery with every bite. But in America, these whimsical candies were outlawed for decades, leaving generations of kids to only hear about them in stories. Kinder eggs were introduced in Europe in the 1960s. They were simple, magical, and completely irresistible. A hollow chocolate egg that hid a small plastic toy inside, often requiring assembly. The combination of chocolate and surprise made them iconic, a modern take on the childhood fascination with hidden treasures. Families across Europe and elsewhere embraced them instantly. When they were imported into the United States, the charm remained, but so did the problem. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, classified the toy inside as a non nutritive object embedded in candy, which violated federal regulations. The law was designed to prevent choking hazards, particularly for young children. Even a simple, harmless toy could be seen as a potential risk in the eyes of regulators. This meant Kinder Surprise eggs were effectively banned in the US, though they remained a beloved import in Europe. American kids could read about them, see them in photographs, and covet them, but they couldn't legally enjoy the simple thrill of breaking open the chocolate shell to reveal a hidden treasure. Smugglers and clever travelers occasionally brought them across borders, creating a secretive, almost forbidden appeal. The ban lasted for decades until modified versions were introduced. Kinder Joy and other alternatives separated the chocolate from the toy to comply with regulations. While the magic of the original was preserved in some form, the experience of finding the toy inside the chocolate, an element of surprise, delight, and hands on joy, was forever altered for American children. Kinder eggs are a reminder of how cultural delights can collide with safety regulations. A treat meant to spark joy became a cautionary tale, its ban turning it into something almost mythical in the American imagination. And while chocolate toys disappeared from shelves, a far more famous American beverage would face its own transformation, an iconic drink beloved by millions that contained a secret ingredient no longer allowed. Shark fin soup and the American ban. There was a time when shark fin soup, a symbol of wealth and celebration in Chinese American culture, could be found in high end restaurants across the United States. Rich, savory, and steeped in tradition, it was considered a delicacy at weddings, banquets, and special occasions, but it also became one of the most controversial dishes ever to appear on American tables. Shark fin soup has a long history. In China, it was prized for its texture rather than its flavor, often served in elaborate broths and accompanied by luxury ingredients like crab or chicken. When Chinese immigrants brought their cuisine to America in the 19th and early 20th centuries, shark fin soup quickly became a status symbol in urban Chinatowns. Diners would pay premium prices for a bowl, enjoying not only the taste, but the prestige of partaking in a tradition that stretched back centuries. Its popularity was partly driven by culture and partly by curiosity. Shark fin was exotic, rare, and associated with prosperity and good fortune. Families would serve it during major celebrations, and restaurants advertised it as the pinnacle of culinary refinement. It was not merely food, it was ritual, symbolism, and a taste of the old world brought to the new. However, as conservation awareness grew in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the environmental impact of shark finning could no longer be ignored. Sharks were being hunted to the brink, often with their fins removed and bodies discarded, a cruel and unsustainable practice. Animal rights activists, scientists, and concerned citizens campaigned against the dish, highlighting the ethical and ecological consequences of serving it. By the 2000s, several U.S. states and cities began implementing bans on the sale and possession of shark fins. Restaurants were forced to remove the soup from menus, and import restrictions limited its availability. What had once been a symbol of tradition and luxury became a focal point for debates about sustainability and morality. Diners and restaurateurs mourned the loss, lamenting the disappearance of a dish that connected them to heritage and celebration. Shark fin soup's story is about more than flavor. It's about cultural transition and the tension between tradition and modern responsibility. The dish that once represented wealth, ceremony, and a culinary connection to the past became a symbol of change, a reminder that even cherished foods are not immune to ethical and environmental scrutiny. Though it may still be served abroad, in America, shark fin soup has largely vanished, leaving behind memories of lavish banquets, celebratory feasts, and a culinary heritage that had to adapt to new social and environmental norms. And as one exotic and controversial dish disappeared from American menus, another ubiquitous ingredient quietly faced its own dramatic removal. Less about ethics, more about the hidden dangers it carried in kitchens across the country. Looking back at these foods and drinks, it's clear that America's culinary history is far more than recipes and ingredients. It's a story of ambition, curiosity, and the ever changing boundaries of taste, culture, and safety. Radium bread, absinthe, raw milk, horse steaks, and turtle soup all remind us that what seems ordinary today might once have been extraordinary, controversial, or even dangerous. These banned foods were more than just sustenance. They were symbols of progress, indulgence, or social status, reflecting the hopes, fears, and values of the people who consumed them. Many of these items vanished not because they lacked flavor, but because the world changed around them. Advances in science revealed hidden dangers, like the toxic saffron in sassafras root or the addictive cocaine in early Coca-Cola. Ethical and cultural shifts transformed perception, as with horse meat or shark fin soup. Scarcity and environmental concerns claimed turtle soup and exotic ingredients. Even playful treats like Kinder Surprise eggs were prohibited not for their taste but for the potential risks hidden inside. Each disappearance tells a story of a society grappling with knowledge, morality, and responsibility, often in ways that felt shocking at the time. Yet, despite being banned, these foods live on in memory, nostalgia, and imagination. They represent a time when culinary experimentation was audacious and when Americans willingly embraced the unusual, the daring, and the forbidden. They teach us that food is never just about nourishment. It carries emotion, identity, and history in every bite. The thrill of tasting the forbidden, the pride in crafting a traditional dish, the fascination with something exotic or dangerous, all of these are part of what makes food a living record of culture. Remembering these lost foods is not just an exercise in curiosity, it's a celebration of the adventurous spirit of Americans past. It's a recognition of the risks they took, the creativity they displayed, and the lessons they left behind. From glowing bread to disappearing delicacies, each banned item is a window into the imagination, science, and culture of its era. As we close this chapter of culinary history, we're reminded that food is fleeting, not only because tastes change, but because life itself moves forward. What was once commonplace can become forbidden, what was once dangerous can become myth, and what was once exotic can inspire wonder for generations to come. These banned American foods are more than curiosities, they are echoes of the past, flavors and stories that continue to haunt our memory, shaping the way we think about what we eat, why we eat it, and the history carried on our plates. In exploring them, we not only taste the past, but also understand it, appreciating the strange, wonderful, and sometimes shocking journey of American cuisine. A journey where curiosity, culture, and caution collide in ways that are as unforgettable as the flavors themselves.